few years ago, the director of the Figge Art Museum, Tim Schiffer, asked me if I would be willing to have an exhibition of my work in the Figge. And of course, I agreed to that. That was quite an honor. And Tim and his staff put together this exhibition last year, and they did an incredible job. And it caused me to ask myself, how did we come to this? And as I look back, I was able to identify 12 specific events that happened over my lifetime that led to this conclusion. And we can talk about that a little bit. When I was born, my father and mother were running this gas station in Culbertson, Nebraska. And as far back as I can remember, I made things. And here's an example, a model airplane. And time went on. My father, at some point along in here, went to a farm auction, and he brought home a wood lathe. I didn't want to leave that part out. And I made some things, and this chess set is a part of that. And then time went on, and eventually I graduated from Iowa State University in 1965 with a degree in industrial education, where I learned a lot more ways to make things. And I went to work at this GI case plant in Bettendorf, Iowa, as an engineering test technician. Now, I had woodworking as an avocation, and I made a number of things, including this bedroom set and this bracket clock. And in 1973, I was still turning things, and I did this cookie jar as segmented wood. And then in 1975, I had an invitation to subscribe to a new magazine that was going to be published called Fine Woodworking. And I did subscribe to that magazine. And then in the next year, in the third issue that they put out, there was a book review. And I sent away for that book, and the book was by Dale Nish. It was called Creative Woodturning. And in 1975-76, woodturning was just beginning to be recognized as an art form. As a matter of fact, 5 years later, Dale was able to write this book, Artistic Woodturning. And those two books turned my attention pretty much away from any other avocation to wood turning. And eventually, in 1997, I went to my first wood turning symposium in St. Louis. And there were 4 presenters there, and these people represented the sort of folks that I really idolized. They were world-renowned wood turning artists. And I also met Binh at that particular symposium. And I had a little discussion with Binh about a bowl that he had turned and had on display there. And then in 1998, 98, yeah, get this right, I decided to go full-time as a wood turner. And my objective was to become one of those people that did those presentations. I understood that my chances of success at that were pretty slim. So I had this little philosophy as a security blanket. I'm going to go for the brass ring. If I never touch it, I will die happily trying. The younger people in the audience are going to have to look that up. The brass ring had to do with carousels and amputations, but that's another story. And then I went to another symposium that same year in Akron, Ohio, where I saw the work of this artist, Frank Sudol, and I was just blown away by these pieces. They were 2 to 3 feet tall. They were 1/16 of an inch thick, and they had these animals that were overlaid and interlaced, and they were depicted by piercing and by drawing and by painting. And it was just absolutely amazing to me that anyone could do this. And the artist that did that was Frank Sudol. He was a different sort of a character. He was a Del Mono artist, and Del Mono was a gallery out of Los Angeles, and they represented about 80 to 90% of the world's recognized wood turning artists. Frank was one of them, and they took their artists to SOFA New York and SOFA Chicago every year, and this particular photograph is SOFA Chicago at Navy Pier. It's a big show. Now, Frank also was a bit of a philosopher, and he didn't think it was right for him to live in a house that somebody else had built, so he decided he was going to build his own. And this is the house that he built up in northern Saskatchewan. And it doesn't look like much in this photograph, but it contains a little over 7,000 square feet of living space and 2 floors, and he built it for $65,000. And he was able to do that because he gained notoriety doing this, and it got into the newspapers and the magazines, and people came from all over to help Frank build this house. And they didn't do it for money, they just did it for the experience. And that caused Frank to voice this philosophy, which is, if you have a mission in life, the whole world will conspire to help you. How true that is. So I went to another symposium that year, actually by Dale Nish at Brigham Young University, and I met a guy there wearing a t-shirt that had the Chicago Woodturners logo on it. And the upshot of that meeting was that I joined the Chicago Woodturners. And I started going to their meetings once a month. It was about a 3-hour drive for me. You know, it was a great bunch of people, and I was learning a lot of stuff. And about the same time, Binh moved from St. Louis to Chicago, and he also joined the Chicago Woodturners. Now, Binh and a group of his friends had arranged to hire Frank Sudol to come to Binh's studio for a week and work with them. Just 2 weeks before that was to happen, one of the persons that was going to be involved had to drop out, Dave Wall, and Binh went looking for a replacement. So he called up the president of the Chicago Woodturners, who was Dan Anderson, and he said, do you know of anybody who would be willing to spend $400 to come to my studio for a week and work with Frank Sudol? And Dan said, how about that new guy from Iowa? And Binh called me up, and of course, I agreed. You know, it was a dream come true for me. And here we are in Binh's new studio. That's Binh on the left and Frank Sudol. And the other guy in the picture is Fletcher Hartline, who taught Binh how to turn. Now, this is what we worked on during that week. And the week was so successful, we learned so much from each other that we were planning to repeat the experience in the fall. And Frank Sudol said, look, if you're going to do this, again, I want to be part of it. And I don't mean that I want you to hire me. I'm willing to pay to be here. I want to be a part of this experience. And we did. So in the fall, we did it again. We brought in David Marks from California to teach us gilding, and we had another excellent experience. And we did this several times. And things began to move for us. And in the next year, in 2000, Del Monte Gallery asked Binh to join their ranks, and the year after that, they asked me. And we sort of realized that we had at least got our feet into the first floor, the ground floor. Now, we talked a lot about the serendipity that was involved here, but we haven't talked much about determination. So people look at my work and they say, boy, you must have a lot of patience, but I don't. I'm not a patient person at all. I am determined. I give you an example of that. This is a signature vessel, one of my signature vessels. And what it takes to make a vessel like this is a bit daunting for some folks. First of all, we can't go to Home Depot and buy the materials. So there's Joe Merhage and Jerry Sargent and I, after a February day spent cutting this cherry log that was blown down in a storm, cutting it up in a ravine in the snow in Rock Island and rolling it up out of the ravine so that we could take it back and work on it. And when you load it onto a lathe, you need some pretty good sized equipment to work on vessels like this. This is what that looks like. And then you have to start getting the external shape on it. Once you've got that all done, it has to be hollowed. And of course, there's a bunch more steps I won't bore you with. And then we eventually get the piece masked. And in this case here, we're laying out the pattern and cutting the pattern. And here I'm peeling the masking off. We're airbrushing on some shading in this case. And then we cut some more of the mask out and we airbrush on the color. And when we're done with all of that and we peel the mask off, this is what it looks like. So we're partway there. Now we mask it again, and now we cut out the floors of the cubicles. And we gild it with silver. This is pure silver that is put onto the floors of the cubicles. And then we take little ants and cut them out of copy paper, and we lay the ants on the silver, and we drop acid on the paper, and that carries the acid to the silver. And the result is that in about 45 minutes, you get an ant in patina on the silver. So when you peel that off, this is what it looks like, and you're still not done. It needs lines, so we start drawing some lines on it, horizontal and vertical lines, and eventually we get to this point. Now, concept is easy in art, but execution is often very, very difficult. Here's another example of that. This piece was made for an invitational last year in the Northwest, and it has 5,700 bugle beads that are glued into 5,700 holes on the piece, drilled into the piece. And that sounds pretty easy, relatively. However, when you buy bugle beads, they're not all the same size. So you have to sit there and sort through thousands and thousands of bugle beads to find the 5,700 that you need that are the correct diameter to fit into the hole. Now, I have some co-conspirators here. This is Katie Kiley, who did the ink drawings on the band around this piece. And this is Rafael Yacarino. Several of you might know him as a Davenport artist. He did the color on this piece. And Joe Merhage and I are almost at 300 pieces and counting. And that's how we went about getting to this point.